Hello, everyone. I'd like to wish you all a very warm welcome to the very first ever MEDIN webinar. My name is Roseanna and I'm the workstream lead for standards within the MEDIN core team. And part of my role is coordinating the delivery of training. So we run regular training workshops online, and this webinar series is our newest offering to allow us to cover some topics in a little bit more detail and showcase some of the examples of how MEDIN principles and tools are applied by some of the organisations in our network. I want to encourage discussion and curiosity, so you might notice that there's no chat and that you can't raise your hand or unmute, but there is a Q&A. So if you have any questions, please raise them using the Q&A, and you can upvote other people's questions as well, so please do that if someone's already asked a question that you'd really like to know the answer to. Then after each presentation, we'll try to answer a couple of the highest ranked questions related to the presentation. And if we have any extra time at the end, we'll cover a few more. And anything that's left over after that, we can go through and type responses to. These webinars are also being recorded and will be uploaded to the MEDIN YouTube channel afterwards. So if you find it interesting, you can share it around and rewatch it if you want to revisit anything later. We have some fantastic presentations today from Monica at the British Oceanographic Data Centre on data planning and stewardship. And then Harry from the Crown Estate is going to talk to us about how MEDIN is used to enhance the value of their database called the Marine Data Exchange. But I thought I would kick things off today with an introduction to MEDIN for anyone that's not familiar. So MEDIN stands for the Marine Environmental Data and Information Network, and our tagline is measure once, use many times. This is because MEDIN aims to make UK marine data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, or FAIR. And we do this by providing marine data guidelines, a MEDIN standard, tools for creating metadata, an online portal to act as a hub for UK marine data, and a network of specialist data archive centres. We have over 60 partners now who are UK organisations that adhere to MEDIN standards and promote good data management practices, and who are committed to making it easier to find, access, and reuse UK marine data. The MEDIN is a long-term open partnership funded and governed by a consortium of 16 sponsors whose logos are along the screen here. These sponsors include a range of UK marine organisations who support MEDIN's principles and lead the UK in marine data management. We also have 7 accredited data archive centres specialising in different data types. And we've been working with UK organisations since 2008 to promote good data management practices. And we're hosted at the National Oceanography Centre in both Liverpool and Southampton. So MEDIN has essentially built a national framework for UK marine data to achieve our aim of making data fair. This includes our network of data archive centres and other experts who provide advice, guidance on data issues and make sure that our tools and guidelines are fit for purpose. We have a centralised portal which acts as a hub for access to UK marine data. And then we have these standards and guidelines which are drafted by the experts and ensure that data on the portal are findable and reusable. And all of this is marine specific. So MEDIN is a national framework, but why do we need a national framework for marine data? And the simple answer to that is that marine data can be extremely costly to collect and have significant reuse value. So an environmental data point that's taken at a particular time in a particular place, it can never be repeated. So it's really important that it's preserved and able to be reused to give context to future measurements. So in 2019, we commissioned a cost-benefit analysis of MEDIN, which was conducted by an independent body, and that found a ratio of 8:1 benefits to costs. So for every £1 spent in MEDIN, it returns £8 of value. And some of the major benefits were making it easier to find data, being able to make better decisions because of having access to more evidence, being able to stay more organised, and even being able to avoid conducting new marine surveys entirely if suitable data already existed. So how do we ensure that data shared within the MEDIN network is consistently high quality and discoverable and useful across the community? That's where the MEDIN guidelines and discovery metadata standard come in. So we have around 30 guidelines for different data types or data collection methods to ensure datasets contain all of the right information so that they can be reused. These guidelines are available to download from our website, and they're categorized into themes to make them easier to find. But most importantly, they are community derived and supported. We regularly update them, and we work to create new guidelines for emerging data types as required. So basically, the guidelines can be used as a checklist to make sure you have all of your dataset usage metadata. The Discover Metadata standard is what underpins all the metadata records in the MEDIN portal. So each dataset is described in a standardized way according to the MEDIN Discovery Metadata Standard, which is a profile of ISO 19115, which essentially defines the schema required for describing geographic information and services by means of metadata. So basically, it's a standard format for signposting datasets, basically. So the EU took that ISO standard, made it EU specific through Inspire, and Gemini made it UK specific, and then MEDIN took that and made it marine specific. So the MEDIN Discovery Metadata profile is fully compliant with Gemini, Inspire, and the ISO standard. It's just UK marine specific through the controlled vocabularies and the examples that we use. We have two free tools for creating MEDIN compliant discovery metadata records. So we have the online discovery metadata editor, which is suitable for generating metadata for a small number of datasets, which can be exported directly into the MEDIN portal. And then we have Metadata Maestro, which uses a web service to access the required vocabularies when an internet connection is available. Otherwise, it can operate in desktop standalone mode. So that makes it a really good option if you're working on board a ship or anytime you don't have a reliable internet connection. So because all of the discovery metadata records from all the different organizations are formatted in the same way and contain all of the same information, we can display that on our centralized portal and allow users to search for datasets all in one place. We currently have over 18,600 datasets from over 600 originating organizations. And also because the standard is compliant with national and international standards, it means these records can be further distributed to other national and international initiatives like data.gov, ICES, and eBotnet. So this makes those datasets even more widely discoverable. So that was a very brief overview of MEDIN. But if you would like to find out more or want some hands-on guidance on creating MEDIN compliant discovery metadata or searching the portal or using the data guidelines, we run regular free online workshops. There's one in October and also one in February next year. You can see the website to register. We also have a YouTube channel with some quick how-to videos if you just want some quick pointers. The first place to go to find out more about MEDIN and to access all of our tools and resources is the MEDIN website, of course. And we are also on social media, so you can follow us for updates. We also release a quarterly electronic newsletter called Marine Data News, which you can subscribe to for free. And our partners and sponsors share some sort of news articles about marine data and what they're working on in there. Interesting, I would recommend. If your organisation isn't already a partner or a sponsor, it's worth considering. There's lots of benefits to joining the MEDIN network. And if you want to find out more, you can email us. I won't bore you with the sales pitch right now, but having more different organisations in our network makes us better able to serve the entire marine community and make data sharing easier and better for everyone. So these are our current partners. Hopefully this has provided a little bit of context for the upcoming talks and just given you a little bit of information about MEDIN if you hadn't already heard of it before. I think we've got some time for a few questions. I think my colleague Charlotte's been monitoring the Q&A. I don't know if there's anything yet. Nothing yet. I'll give you, I think there's a little bit of a delay between when I'm speaking and when you hear it eventually. So I'll give it maybe 10 seconds and then we can move on if there's no questions.
There is a question. Will a recording of this webinar be made available afterwards?
Yes, it will. So I'll be uploading it to the YouTube channel, and also since you've registered, you should be able to just access the recording straight afterwards as well. Doesn't look like there's any other questions at the moment. So should we move on to the next presentation? We'll move on to the screen, Monica. So next up, we have Monica from the British Oceanographic Data Centre, which is the MEDIN Data Archive Centre for oceanographic data, as well as being the UK's National Marine Data Centre. So she's going to talk to us about data planning and stewardship.
Thank you, Roseanna. Okay, so yes, as Roseanna said, my name is Monica Hanley. I'm a data manager here at the British Oceanographic Data Centre, and I'm going to give a very, very high-level overview of data planning and data stewardship and why it's important, particularly for environmental data. So just to start, I know Roseanna has already covered this a little bit, but the British Oceanographic Data Centre is one of the dedicated NERC environmental data centres. Together, all of the data centers make up the Environmental Data Service, or the EDS. This makes us the UK National Marine Data Centre. We are hosted by the National Oceanography Centre. We have sites here in Southampton and Liverpool, and we are one of the 7 MEDIN accredited data archive centres. So BODC provides project data management for a number of UK and international marine projects. So here's just a little overview of the research data management lifecycle. We've split it into 4 major categories. The first is data management planning. The second is data collection, capture, and analysis. The third is data storage and archiving, sharing, and publishing. And finally, we have data cataloging, discovery, and reuse. And I'll talk a little bit more about each one of these throughout the presentation. So we believe that data should be open and follow FAIR data principles. FAIR stands for findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. In order to achieve this, data must be attributed with rich metadata. Data should have persistent identifiers, which are searchable. Access to both data and its metadata is free and open. Controlled vocabularies are used, and data are in non-proprietary file formats, which means that they don't need specialist software to open the files or read the data. So now I'm going to go into data management planning, what it actually is and why it's important. So a data management plan is a living document which should be updated throughout the lifetime of a project as it's needed. Things often change throughout a project, and the data sets initially planned may not all be generated for whatever reason. Extra data sets may end up being generated, or funding may run out before all the data sets can be analyzed or worked up. The data management plan should always be revisited and amended to reflect any of these scenarios as they crop up throughout the project. The data management plan should document the approach for all project participants, including potential repositories and data stewards, for what happens to the data throughout the project. In summary, the data management plan should describe the project description, any roles and responsibilities for all parties concerned, information on reusing the data, how the data is being created and collected, as well as processed and analyzed, any information about data preservation, and any licensing or ethics that should be considered. Other key information to be included in a data management plan is a list of data sets being generated by the project. This list of data sets should document the estimated size of a data set, the format of any files, when the data will be produced, if the data is being sent to a repository and when, or if not, where it will be kept, the publication route of the data, including any licensing information, the roles and responsibilities of project participants associated with the data set, as I've already mentioned, including any data stewards wherever appropriate, and details on the funder of the project and any requirements from this funder. So how can you actually create a data management plan? A simple Word or Excel document is fine. It just really needs to be a shared document that's accessible for all project participants, where they can edit their data sets and update the document and see all of the other data sets being produced. However, if you are working with a repository, they may have standard data management plan formats and requirements, or have access to specific programs. For example, within the EDS, we use the data stewardship wizard. And you can see here from this screenshot, it's tagged with all of the EDS data centers. And this means it makes it really easy for us to share information between the project participants, the data center, any other data centers that need to be involved, as well as NERC as the funder. So everybody can see what's happening throughout the lifetime of the project. So I'm now going to move into practical data management, some tips and tricks and how it can be achieved. So a lot of information is required to come alongside the data. I've broken it down into project level documentation and data level documentation. At the project level, we need to understand and document data collection methods, including instruments and protocols used, any standards that are used, any file and data structures, procedures for quality control and versioning of the data, and any problems that may affect data reuse. Now, if we move into more specific data level documentation, we need to understand the date and the version of the data that's been created, names and definitions of fields or variables, reasons for any missing values, and the missing value term. So for example, is it just a blank cell in an Excel file, or has the missing value been replaced with a character string or a number string? Any problems that may affect specific records, and any code used to generate process data values. I'm just going to show a really, really quick example of how we can describe our data to give it extra value. So if we see this fairly poor example here, it's just a list of numbers. It's relatively meaningless. It probably made sense to the data originator at the time they wrote it down and collected it, but it's relatively useless to an end user. So if we look at a slightly better example, you can see here we've now added a date and a header with variable names. But if we look a little bit closer, under the date column, we can't actually tell if that's the 5th of August or the 8th of May. And T as a variable, we could assume it means temperature, but we really want to avoid making assumptions about data. So again, this may look a little bit better, but it's still relatively meaningless without going back to the data originator. Now, if we look at a good example, you can see here we have a much better header. We have variables that are described with units. So the dates are given in a standard format. We now have a time channel, which is specified in UTC, so we can see exactly when the samples were taken. And we can see the data is temperature after all, and has been measured in degrees Celsius. So this is a really nice way to show that just a little bit of extra information can really increase the value of the data. So we talk a lot about metadata. There are several types of metadata. Going from the top down, we have discovery metadata, which enables data to be found. And this includes things like project, date, geographical area, such as a general bounding box for data collection. We have browse metadata, which is a bit more detailed, and it includes things like what variables were observed. We have usage metadata, which is highly detailed, and this includes the variable names, units, precise coordinates. We have citation metadata, which links to academic papers citing the data, such as post-fact annotations. And then there's any extra metadata, which is just any further details that might be useful, such as information about instruments that were used to collect the data. So here's a little diagram of some key metadata that we need. Again, it's just the data about the data. So as I've previously said, we need to know the units that the data are in, who collected it, how it was collected, the date and time and specific location of collection, why it was collected, any standard methods and quality control methods, and any data access policies that should be applied to the data. Also do some quality control procedures. So to do this, you can visualize your data. These screenshots here are examples of how BODC visualizes data, and it makes it very easy to see any outliers in the data. You can do some validity checks, which are just standard things such as checking that your data falls within a recognized minimum and maximum of the variable that you're looking at. You can use a documented flagging system to flag any outliers that you do find in your data. All of this ensures accuracy and reliability of the data that you've collected. Now, there are many standards that are published for the science community to follow, so you don't have to come up with any of this yourself, but you must ensure that all procedures followed are well documented for any end user. So you might be thinking, wow, that's a lot of information. How do I actually achieve this? Standard templates are available for use to remind data originators of information required. The image on the right shows a standard metadata template that BODC provide for discrete sample data. These templates should be filled in during data collection to ensure they're accurate. You should avoid handwritten metadata and free text wherever possible. And you should always ensure that file names are meaningful without spaces and characters and include dates and version numbers so you know exactly what data is in which file. So I'm now going to move on to the final section of my presentation, which is an overview of data stewardship. And this is specifically from the perspective of the British Oceanographic Data Centre. So before I move forward, it's important to remember that funders, organizational requirements, or journals may constrain your use of repositories. And it's also important to remember that while some of these principles may be universal across repositories, many aren't, and not all repositories have dedicated data stewards. But with that in mind, at BODC, data can be tagged with reuse restrictions through access policies and licenses. Data access policies can be set up and applied to data by a repository to manage who can download and use data. For example, NERC allows their data to have a 2-year embargo period to allow for any publications to be written using the data that's been collected by the project participants. The embargo period begins as soon as the data are collected, and data access policies can restrict data for academic use only, project participants, full public use, etc. There's a wide range of varieties of what the accesses can restrict, including timescales. Now, licenses determine the terms of use of the data. They're effectively a legal arrangement between the data originator and the end user. Publicly funded research should have open access data and therefore use open licenses. Licenses can also state how the data should be acknowledged by an end user. We use controlled vocabularies, and these are a structured list of terms for specific use or context. Terminology should follow FAIR principles. So this means they should be discoverable and described with a metadata record, such as the one seen to the right of the screen. They provide both human and machine readable access to the content. They use standardized language to describe terms, classes, and concepts. The content has globally unique and persistent identifiers, and they are published in a trustworthy semantic repository. Here at BODC, we host the NERC vocabulary server, which again can be seen to the right, but I believe this is the topic of another webinar, so I won't go into much detail here. So one of the major roles of a data repository is to provide archival for secure long-term storage of data. In order to do this, the data format should be reusable and accessible. This means the files need to be in a non-proprietary format. They should be open with documented standards, self-described with standard character encodings, uncompressed wherever possible, and they should be complete and science-ready. That means we don't necessarily want to just have a dump of all of the raw data that can't necessarily be used easily by an end user. We want the data that's ready to be worked up and published. Secure archives should have a concept of least privilege. This means that the archives are locked down with read-only access, so files cannot accidentally be overwritten. They should have funding for long-term security, documented backup and disaster recovery procedures, and wherever possible, archive monitoring system to detect any file corruption. And if any corruption is detected, it should be dealt with in a timely manner. So we want fully documented data in a standard format with complete metadata that's been quality controlled. And then that's when BODC will put it into an archive for secure long-term storage. Another key role of a data repository is the data publication and access. So there's a few ways that we do that here in BODC. First, we can publish the data in a digital object identifier or a DOI. This enables citation in journal papers and gives credit to authors. We can ingest data into our National Oceanographic Database, and this full ingestion of discrete and samples time series data allows data managers to quality control the data, tag it with various discovery metadata, and compile metadata reports to be served alongside the data, as well as transfer the data into a standard format. We create EPMED records. This is an inventory of marine data and data holding centers, and it's the European standard for indexing and searching marine data sets. And we also push certain data into other global repositories or assembly centers, such as CDataNet or MEDIN. So this diagram shows there are four major channels for accessing data at BODC. First, the end user could come along to the BODC website and search and download data from there. They could go to one of our partners, such as MEDIN or CDataNet, and search and download data from there as well. We also deliver data into places like the Met Office or EuroArgo. And we also have services where people can pull data using things like APIs. But really, open data means that anybody can use the data for any use. So working with a data repository, repositories, particularly those with a dedicated data steward, are here to help you through the data lifecycle. We provide long-term secure archival, and we check the data and metadata to ensure validity before it's archived and published. And we publish your data alongside key metadata. So if we go back to the data lifecycle diagram, the first two that I mentioned, which were data planning and data collection and analyzing, are really done by the data originator themselves. However, data stewards are on hand to offer best practices and answer any questions that the data originator may have. Then the final two, which are data archival and data reuse, is when the data is effectively handed over to the data repository, where we can apply any licenses and persistent identifiers and publish metadata catalogs and publish the data into data portals for end users to access. So just to summarize, end-to-end data management is really valuable. Your data has value beyond your own immediate work, and it underpins your work and the wider science community's work. So you need to take individual action to curate it and consider how your data will outlive you. Not only does your data underpin your own work, but it has value far beyond, and other scientists are not able to take the same measurement in the ocean or have access to the samples you're looking at. So it's imperative that we allow other scientists to access our data. And generating and using data advances the science community. And that's all for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Monica. So we have time for some questions. I know there's one that's come through in the chat. So maybe while we're answering that one, if anyone else has any questions, feel free to type them in the Q&A as well. And let Charlotte read out the question.
The question is, I wonder if you or anyone else has a template for a data management plan that they would be willing to share, e.g. a spreadsheet rather than linked to specific software.
Yes, we used to use, before we started using the data stewardship wizard, we used to use Word documents. I'm sure that we are happy to share these. I will just double check with BODC management before I send them out, but I'm sure sending out a blank one of these would be absolutely fine. So I can follow up with you after this.
Yeah, so there's also a MEDIN data management plan that's currently under review, and we'll make that available after the recording as well. Doesn't look like there's any more questions. No? Okay. So we will hand over to Harry from the Crown Estate, and he's going to be talking about the Marine Data Exchange and their collaboration with MEDIN and how MEDIN helps to enhance the value of their database. Bring you onto the screen.
Brilliant. Can you see my screen and me?
Yes, that's good.
Brilliant. Okay, my Wi-Fi was slightly dropping out there, so please do say if it happens again. It's been a final day, so I hope it doesn't. But hello all. Welcome. Thank you for joining. It's great to be going last because now hopefully everybody watching has a relatively good understanding of MEDIN and what we mean by fairness and metadata and sort of that controlled vocab gist that everybody's been talking about. So it makes my job a lot easier. I am the Marine Data Advisor at the Crown Estate. So what I do is partially manage the Marine Data Exchange, working closely with MEDIN. And today we'll be talking about how the Crown Estate and our database, the Marine Data Exchange, utilize MEDIN and collaborate with MEDIN to get the best value from our database for the sort of research community and industrial community around marine environmental data. So yeah, let's dive into it. This is what we're going to be talking about. So a bit of context. So what we're trying to do at the Marine Data Exchange, what our ambitions are and the challenges we face, why the Crown Estate and MEDIN work together, how we work together, and the purpose of our collaboration. I'll be touching on the MDE requirements, the MDE being the Marine Data Exchange is an acronym. So when I say requirements, I mean what we require our data uploaders, who are the Crown Estate's customers, to deliver when delivering data. So again, repeating some of that stuff about the discovery metadata and the data guidelines, and then ultimately rounding it off with how this enhances the Marine Data Exchange's value and how our users can derive benefit from that, with a focus and a lens of MEDIN, of course. So back in 2013, the Marine Data Exchange was established by the Crown Estate. So that's over a decade ago now, which is very exciting. The top points there are sort of the main targets. So back in 2013, offshore wind was the main focus. Since then, it's expanded to other industries within the Crown Estate's remit. Really, the main goal was to promote the reuse of that industry data. So often, these offshore surveys take huge amount of time and money and effort to collect and conduct. Previously, before the Marine Data Exchange, it was often that the data that was collected and the reporting would be used for the intended purpose to develop an offshore wind farm, for example, and then it would be put in the archives. And we really wanted to promote that reuse for benefit internally, to promote our sort of decision making and spatial planning, but also to support externally. So the industry, the offshore wind industry, for sustainable development of the seabed, but also academia. So we support PhDs with the data on the Marine Data Exchange, other industries, new energies, really to make sure that we don't lose this data. And if there is the case where certain projects don't go ahead, we've now got this rich collection of data, which we store on the Marine Data Exchange, that can be used for future development in that area and future research in that area. And we've been doing that for over 10 years now, hopefully ticking the boxes that we aim to achieve and continuously developing to do so. Here's a bit of a snapshot of our analytics from 2024, I believe. We won't go into it in too much detail, but the main things I wanted to pull out is the sort of variety of what we hold on the Marine Data Exchange. So in the sort of bottom middle infogram, you can see the data holding by theme, and you can see all the themes we have. And this makes the Marine Data Exchange a really unique database, because it's not focused on a specific data type or format. It spans from intertidal ecology to noise surveys to geophysical, which is, as you can see, the dominating survey holding we have, and also in various areas as well by the top right. And we have now over 500 terabytes of data, which is just amazing. And it's just about how we can get the best value of that, not just collecting data for the sake of collecting data, but really making sure the data we're collecting is feeding into industry and we're following best practice. Which got, again, a snapshot of our usership. in 2024. So obviously a UK focus, but also around Europe, Scandinavia, particularly, and Australia and America as well, which is more just an interest point. But seeing how we can make the database valuable for the global industries as well, and how we can make that transferable. Bit of a timeline here. I should say, if I'm skipping across too fast, these slides will be shared afterwards, but feel free to ask any questions on any of the points. But as I say, 2013 was when the MD was established. Some major milestones from there, which we don't need to necessarily go into, but really cool to see how we're continually developing from that. So if we look at our vision, to finish off this sort of first section, the real goal is to identify and sort of galvanize and promote data flows both in and out of the Marine Data Exchange. So understanding what other data alongside industry data and research we should be holding on the Marine Data Exchange, but also how we can support data flows out of the Marine Data Exchange. Can we identify any or fund any research projects, industry projects internally to make maximum value out of data? Again, to not collect data for data's sake, but really support MEDIN's vision of sort of collecting once and using many times. So ultimately, the goal of that would be to enable data-driven research and insights from the Marine Data Exchange, both from increasing the MD usership, but also the fairness of our data, which is what we've already spoken about today in the terms of findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, and also the quality there as well. So there's obviously challenges with these, as I'm sure many people know, but obviously touching on what I just mentioned about the Marine Data Exchange is that we have a vast variety of data. So that is one of the key benefits of the Marine Data Exchange, because you can come here as a one-stop shop for all things offshore industry. So you can see all of the surveys throughout the lifespan of a project within one database, which is really unique and really amazing. But it also poses the question and the challenge of how can we make this data as fair as possible and valuable as possible, whilst also maintaining the vast variety of data collected in different formats from different sources and owners within data as well. So it's quite site-specific and fragmentary as well. So really good challenges there that we are sort of always working to support and get over as well. So if we move on to collaboration, I believe. So why the Marine Data Exchange and MEDIN? We have been working together for, well, I don't know, but before I joined the Crown Estate, which was 2 years ago, we've got a really strong relationship with MEDIN, which has proven really valuable and is sort of the foundation of the Marine Data Exchange as well, and a lot of things we'll get on to. So we're a sponsor alongside all of the companies on the right there, which is a bit faint, but hopefully you can see, which means we provide funding, as Roseanna mentioned, and feed into some key decisions, which is really good. We're part of both the standards and the Data Archive Centre working groups, which means, again, we can feed in on the standards, the metadata, and things that we really rely on, making sure that we're in the conversation alongside the data archive centres against other people within the standards chamber, just making sure we're sort of understanding what we're making our customers do, and then also feeding into MEDIN newsletters as well, which I hope everybody has seen alongside that. The last point in terms of enforcing MEDIN compliance, so this is what we're getting onto next when I say MEDIN requirement, MD requirements. So in our data clauses, so within the sort of leases to our customers, and if we focus on offshore wind, an offshore wind developer has to get a lease with the with the Crown Estate. Within that is contractual obligations to provide data to the Crown Estate. And within that contract is also the requirement to provide metadata and also make it compliant with certain MEDIN guidelines. So MEDIN isn't actually written into the lease and these data clauses, but the metadata and the guidelines are written in, and then the Crown Estate and Marine Data Exchange has chosen MEDIN as a mechanism to enforce this. So what do we require? So per survey, we require one metadata XML, so one discovery metadata file that's compliant with MEDIN. We check this as part of QA, but more key to that is the MEDIN data guidelines. So whatever specific data guidelines is relevant for that survey and the deliverables collected from that survey, we require the sort of components identified in those guidelines to be delivered, both the mandatory and conditional components to be delivered within the deliverables, again really enforcing that to make it as findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable as possible. We encourage but don't require MEDIN format, purely just because of the vast amount of data and variety of data we get. We try to make it tread that fine balance between making it as easy as possible for our customers to upload data to reduce any blockers, whilst also enhancing the quality and not sacrificing anything in terms of fairness. So as I say, this really sort of forms the foundation of what we do at the Marine Data Exchange, these MEDIN metadata and guidelines, and that mechanism is through quality assurance. So each survey we get on the Marine Data Exchange goes through our own internal quality assurance process. So that has some Crown Estate QA, but also the key thing is the MEDIN QA. So when I say MEDIN QA, it's basically ensuring that it has that discovery metadata and ensuring it's compliant with the relevant guidelines. And this, again, encourages the industry to adopt MEDIN guidelines and it raises that awareness, but also make sure that when you're looking at data sets on the MD and comparing data sets in the same sort of theme, so if you're comparing two bathymetry data sets, they should in theory contain, well, they will contain the same sort of metadata, that really key information that encourages the reuse of the data. So how does this enhance the value of the Marine Data Exchange? So this first slide is a bit of to prove a point. So to first sort of talk about the value, I wanted to talk about what would happen if we didn't have MEDIN. So the MD skeleton without the sort of meat of MEDIN that provides the foundation, as I mentioned. So ultimately, without getting into this too much, our data wouldn't be nearly as findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. It would be a standalone database, failing to have that really accessible and reusable metadata that controls that controlled vocab that was mentioned. It would sort of increase that inconsistency we have on the Marine Data Exchange, lacking that methods of reporting and the sort of structure in which we take our data on, lacking in that marine data with that metadata sense. And it would also reduce the basis of our quality assurance. Luckily, we're not in that parallel universe, and we do have MEDIN, and therefore we can use it to enhance that value and really get the most out of it. So at the top there, you can see MEDIN is essentially an enabling mechanism. So it's really sort of unique and it's a real luxury to have MEDIN sort of forming a sort of support mechanism on the Marine Data Exchange, enabling us to enforce the enhanced data reporting requirements and ultimately providing fairness for our database. So just conscious of time, so I want to mention the main bits, which are really in interoperability and reusability. Interoperability being a bit of a challenge, and reusability being sort of a real achievement we've got through MEDIN. So interoperability, I say it's a challenge because of that vast variety point I keep mentioning. So because we have so much data on the Marine Data Exchange, we don't sort of require transformation of data because we have such a variety of data sources, types, themes, and instruments sort of collecting data for the Marine Data Exchange. And therefore it's not sort of the feasible and it's not made to have that business case of interoperability. However, we really have managed to improve our interoperability with the use of MEDIN as we sort of have that consistency across different industries, across different data themes and individual surveys. And this is supported by that semantic consistency that was mentioned by the controlled vocabularies, really focusing on that Gemini, Inspire and ISO compliance that Roseanna mentioned. In terms of reusability, it's just really sort of leaps and bounds by using MEDIN. By having sort of that metadata and the mandatory components outlined by MEDIN, we really get enhanced reporting of lineage, provenance of data, spatial information, and ultimately what that does is allows this data to again be collected once and used many times, making it reprocessable, reusable, and also sort of more complete. So with the MEDIN requirements, developers are more likely, and when I say developers, I mean sort of offshore developers, to retain the data they have because they know they have to submit it as a requirement to the Crown Estate. And we have MEDIN and the guidelines MEDIN to produce to back us up to say that there's a reason why we're asking for this data. Again, really in improving our fairness, not just on reusability as well. So that's a bit about it. I appreciate that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but if there are any questions, feel free, hopefully, to have some in the Q&A. I think we've got some time for that, but also get in touch with me via email as well, or LinkedIn. Hopefully that was helpful.
Thank you, Harry. That was a really interesting presentation. I think that really showcases the value of the collaboration with MEDIN. We definitely do have some time for questions, so I will pass over to Charlotte to read those out.
Yeah, we have A question in the chat, Harry. Is there scope for expanding the role of the MDE to include marine data from areas outside of the UK, for instance, offshore wind development in Canada?
Good question. Expanding the role of the MD. So yeah, so it's funny you mentioned that. We've been having a sort of a visioning conversations recently about where we see the marine data exchange going in the long distance, and of course global use and reuse came up, and as I touched upon in the first slide, we really like the idea of the marine data exchange being used and the data from the UK being used. I believe this question is sort of, can we store and support the dissemination of data beyond England, Wales, Northern Ireland, and now Scotland, like Crown State Scotland? Is the scope? There's not at the minute. There definitely could be. It's sort of a grand question about our strategic priorities and understanding. Actually, we want to be the world leading marine database. We believe sort of the facilities we have within the UK industry right now and the data we have puts us in good stead for that. But whether it's just a strategic priority is another question. Offshore wind development in Canada, we basically, the reason why it's a bit more difficult going beyond England, Wales, and Northern Ireland is because of that sort of contractual requirement that are in the data lease. So we can have a business case to go to developers and say, you are contractually required to give us your data. How that would work beyond these borders where we don't really require the data from Canada, we can't have that sort of sound argument to provide that data. It means we would have a lot less influence in the sort of format they provide that data. So if we got the data from Canada, hypothetically, and then we said, okay, now you need to create a MEDIN discovery metadata, and it's not compliant with MEDIN standards, you need to change that. They sort of have no reason because it's not sort of mandated, or there's no statutory requirement there. So it would take a very different shape, and what that shape is, I don't know, but it's an interesting thought for future use. So hopefully I haven't sat on the fence there too much, but definitely want to think about. And we've had sort of conversations with people globally about who look at the marine data exchange as a bit of a case of success and how you can share offshore industry data to promote that sustainable development of the seabed. And it's definitely one where people are interested. Whether the marine data exchange is the right vessel, a mechanism for that is another question.
Thank you, Harry. There is one more. Our organisation deals with wave data from a variety of different instruments. We struggle a little because parameter naming is not consistent and sometimes contradictory between different instruments. Can you point me to a good source to find a standard set of wave parameter definitions?
Oh, I don't know. Might have to point to Roseanna for that. I wonder if you have anything. So is there anything that MEDIN provide on that front? It's a very good question.
Yeah, really good question. So I'm not sure about wave parameters specifically, but on the NERC vocabulary server, which is what we use for most of our control vocabularies in the marine community, there's a control vocabulary called P01, which contains standard descriptions for all sorts of different parameters. I can put the link in there so you can search that for different parameters. And during our workshops as well, we talk a lot about control vocabularies and go through how to search control vocabularies effectively as well. So if you're confused at all when you're searching, you can come along to a workshop and we'll teach you all about how to search for them.
Thank you. There is a broader MEDIN question, so that might be another one for Roseanna. A significant amount of marine and coastal data is held locally by regional coastal managers, special interest groups, and environmental charities. Is there any support for getting this type of data onto MEDIN?
So yes, so we have our workshops that we teach everyone and anyone. They're for free, so anyone can come along and access the materials there. So we can teach you how to use MEDIN resources, especially volunteers and things who might not want to pay to go on to a course. Then we've got our Data Archive Centre Dash, which deals with species and habitats data primarily, but they also help run the MEDIN help desk, so they can help get your data into a MEDIN format and publish it through their database as well.
Thank you. Can we bring Monica back on for Tanya's question? Monica, Tanya says, how usable is the data to non-scientists? I'm wondering whether practitioners interested in ocean impacts, for example, can use data for decision making.
Yes, absolutely. I've said in the chat, but I'll say for everybody, and especially for those watching on YouTube, we aim to make our data accessible and usable for all audiences. We do this through our extensive metadata reports that we compile to go alongside the data, including definitions of all of our controlled vocabularies that we use and tag with the data, and our descriptions of the data itself, how it was collected and everything. So we make everything human readable and usable for an average end user. So we do encourage non-scientists to access and use the data that we hold. And that's precisely the type of thing that we want people to use our data for. So decision-making, policy-making, all that sort of stuff.
I can jump in as well, and thank you, Tanya, for the question. It seems like almost a plant, because that's exactly what we use MEDIN for as well. So by having the MEDIN metadata, the discovery metadata, there is exactly what Monica was saying, is it really helps sort of that broad data use. And on the Marine Data Exchange as well, we don't have a particular focus group. So we want industry, as I say, we want internal people to be able to use it, but we also want academics and non-scientists to use it as well, just to, well, whatever it may be, whether it just be an interest piece or what you're talking about there in practicing and ocean impacts. We do various things for this. So we have in the past done sort of drawn out insights. So we've got data highlights and stories, drawing out some key bits of the data we hold, but also beyond that, the data is very much human readable and usable by non-scientists. There's data there that is definitely for the technical aspects, where you've got raw data that needs to be processed and stuff like that, which isn't sort of relevant or usable for the majority maybe, but it's also key we have that, which is why we sort of have that broad scope of data acquisition where we take all the deliverables. So some people may just want the report and the maps, so you can look at the maps and understand the impacts that have been revealed by that survey or that piece of research. But then also alongside that, we want to make sure we've got the raw data, the process data, any mobilization and operations reports as well. So then it's sort of usable for all cases. So yes, very much usable, and happy to have a sort of separate conversation on that offline if you want to use the Marine Data Exchange anymore.
I think that's the end of the questions, Roseanna.
Awesome, thank you. So, assuming there's no other questions that come through in the meantime. One last thing I'd like to do before we close the session is just mention that we're collecting feedback. So it'd be wonderful if everyone could fill out this feedback survey. It's anonymous, and your feedback will really help us to improve future webinars and events, and or give us justification to run similar things in future. So we do use it, and it's really useful if you do. And I'll put the link in the Q&A as well, just so you've got that instead if you want to use that.
Could I just,
if you don't want to scan.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah,
Could I just go back to one of Helen's questions in the very bottom? It says, so any offshore renewable energy project is required contractually to provide any environmental data gathered within the offshore to the Marine Data Exchange for open reuse and exploitation by both private and public sectors. If so, is there categories of data that are within this mandatory sharing agreement? And what is the spatial extent from, I'm assuming that is high water, outward? Is this to 12 nautical miles or further seaward? So yes, yes and no, essentially. So within the lease for offshore developments, that data clause is very much present. In terms of open for reuse and exploitation by both private and public sectors, the Marine Data Exchange is ultimately an open access database. But I should mention, and real important caveat, so thank you, Helen, for drawing me up on this, is that the data is not automatically published. So we hold the data confidentially, and half of our data holding at the minute is confidential until the sort of offshore development reaches certain confidentiality gates. So we don't take that data and publish it because that might sacrifice or expose risks to the offshore developers before it's reached the next milestone, for example. So we won't release data before consent, and we won't release the data after that until a final investment decision, for example. So we work closely with the developers and the customers to make sure that there's no risk in publishing that data. We do believe, however, that every data does have a sort of shelf life, and we don't want people to put the effort to uploading it and making it MEDIN compliant without publishing it. But we do make sure that there's no risk to the project, because that's not what the Crown Estate want at all, and that's not the purpose of the Marine Data Exchange. I think that covers off everything. Categories of data, it's, as I say, it's sort of all encompassing. So it's metocean data, it's environmental data, so benthic bird and marine mammals, but it's also geophysical, geotechnical data as well. And there's sort of no limit on that within England, Wales and Northern Ireland in terms of spatially, if it's within the offshore development project. Sorry for cutting you off, Roseanna. I saw that tucked away at the bottom.
No problem. Well done for spotting it. And I think that was an important point to make. So well done. Yes, so I think there's no more questions, are there? I haven't missed anything else. Good. Okay. So in that case, if everyone has scanned the scanner and filled in the form, massive thank you to Monica and to Harry for presenting today, and thank you to everyone for attending and asking questions. Hope you've enjoyed the session and hope to see you at a future webinar.
Cheers, guys. Thank you, Roseanna.
Thank you. Thanks, Roseanna.